The chamber was cold and silent. The walls were not like human stone or metal. They seemed alive, as if the citadel itself was breathing. Ron sat on the floor with his back against the strange surface, his arms heavy from the rough restraints. His ship had been torn apart in the skies, and when he woke from the crash, he was already surrounded by alien guards with blades that glowed faintly in the dim light. He had fought once before in his life, but against these tall beings he had no chance. They captured him with little effort and dragged him to this place, a fortress built with impossible beauty and cruel precision. Ron tried to calm his thoughts. His training as an explorer told him to study everything, to learn even in danger. The chamber had no windows, only one wide door made from a metal that shimmered like glass. A single blue flame burned in a holder on the wall, though there was no smoke. He wondered if the flame was alive too, for it swayed and bent even though no air moved inside the chamber. His stomach growled with hunger. He had been here for hours, perhaps even a day. Time was hard to measure without the stars above him. The silence pressed on him until his thoughts became louder than sound. What would happen to him now? Was he already judged guilty of some unseen crime, simply for being human? He had heard of the Villery, the race that ruled this part of the galaxy. Some humans spoke of them as wise, others as merciless. Their queen was feared in many systems, but Ron had never seen them until now. Their skin was pale like starlight, their eyes sharp and filled with fire. Even the guards who had captured him seemed like carved statues, strong and unmoving. Ron closed his eyes for a moment, trying to breathe slowly. He told himself not to break. Even if this was the end, he wanted to remain calm. He wanted to die as a human, not as a frightened animal. But fear was a heavy weight, and he could feel it pressing deeper into his chest with every passing moment. Then, without warning, the door opened with a sound like rushing water. Ron tensed, his eyes snapping open. He expected guards, perhaps the queen herself, or a judge ready to speak of punishment. But only one figure entered. The chamber grew darker as she stepped inside, her tall form blocking the glow of the hall behind her. It was not a guard. It was a woman. Her walk was silent, her robe woven with thin strands of silver that shimmered faintly in the light of the blue flame. Her face was calm, though her eyes moved quickly, searching every shadow. When she reached the center of the chamber, she turned her gaze to him. Ron held his breath. She was younger than he expected, though still tall like all Villery. Her hair was black with a faint blue sheen, falling in long strands over her shoulders. Her eyes were sharp but not cruel. There was something restless in them, something hidden beneath the calm mask. She stepped closer until she was only a few paces away. Ron wanted to speak, but before he could open his mouth, she raised a finger to her lips and whispered softly. "Do not cry out." The words froze him. They were spoken in his own language, clear and careful. She must have studied it. He nodded slowly, not sure if his voice would even work in that moment. She looked at the door again, making sure no one was near, then turned back to him. Her voice was quiet, almost carried by the silence itself. "You are in danger. They plan to put you on trial. But it will not be a real trial. The decision is already made." Ron stared at her, his thoughts racing. He could not tell if she was a friend or a trick. Why would a stranger, an alien princess, come to him with warning? "Why are you here?" he asked at last, his voice dry from thirst. Her eyes flickered for a moment, as if she was unsure how much to say. Then she leaned closer, her words like a secret carried on fragile air. Because you are not what they believe. They see only a spy, a danger to our world. But I have studied humans. I know you are more than that. Ron shook his head. If your queen has already chosen my fate, then nothing can change it. A small spark appeared in her eyes. Perhaps. But even fate can bend if someone dares to move against it. He could hear the risk in her tone. She was the daughter of the queen, yet here she was, standing in the chamber of a prisoner, whispering warnings that could cost her everything. Why would you risk this? He whispered back. For a moment she looked away, her gaze falling on the blue flame on the wall. Her face softened, and Ron could see pain behind her calm mask. Because I have seen what happens when no one speaks. My people live under silence. I will not be silent this time. She turned back to him, her voice firm despite its quiet tone. My name is Myra. I cannot promise to save you. But I can promise this. You will not face them alone. Ron felt something shift inside him. For the first time since the crash, he felt a thread of hope. It was thin and fragile, but it was enough to breathe again. Myra moved back toward the door. Before leaving, she looked over her shoulder at him. Do not cry out, she repeated. Others must not know I was here. Wait for me. I will return. Then the door closed, leaving the chamber silent once more. Ron sat still, his heart racing faster than before. The darkness of the chamber was no longer only filled with fear. Now it carried something else. A chance, however small, that he was not already lost. He leaned back against the wall, his eyes fixed on the blue flame. For the first time, he whispered to himself, not in despair, but with a new strength. I will wait. The chamber was silent again after Myra left. Ron leaned his head back against the wall and tried to calm his racing heart. The sound of her whisper still echoed in his ears. She had spoken his language. She had promised to return. But he knew promises inside an enemy fortress were fragile things. He could not tell if this was real help or only a passing moment of kindness. Hours passed in slow silence. His throat was dry, his stomach ached, and his body felt weak from lack of food. Yet his mind would not rest. Every time his eyes closed, he saw Myra's face again. The calm strength in her voice did not match the danger around her. Why would the queen's daughter risk so much for him? The door opened once more, and he lifted his head quickly. This time, a guard stepped in. The alien soldier's eyes glowed faintly like burning embers. He carried a tray with a bowl of liquid and a small piece of bread like food. Without a word, the guard placed it on the floor and stepped back out. The door shut with a heavy sound. Ron picked up the food with shaking hands. The bread was hard, but it filled his stomach enough to bring back a little strength. The liquid was cold, tasting faintly of metal, but it eased the fire in his throat. He ate quickly, for he did not know when another chance would come. When the chamber grew darker, he guessed that night had fallen outside the citadel. He curled against the wall, trying to rest, when once again the sound of rushing water filled the chamber. The door slid open, and Myra stepped inside. Her steps were light and careful. In her hands she carried a small bundle. She moved quickly toward him and set the bundle down. Inside were dried fruits, a flask of clear water, and a small cloth to clean his face. You kept your word, Ron whispered, his voice low. I said I would return, Myra replied. And I keep my word. He looked at the food and water, then back at her. If they see you with this, if they know you came here, what will they do to you? Her eyes darkened, but her voice remained calm. You must not worry about me. You must listen instead. They will not give you a fair trial. The Queen has already spoken. You will be judged as guilty. The court will only act out the performance of justice. The end is decided. Ron swallowed hard. He had expected as much, but hearing it spoken aloud sent a chill through him. Then why do this? Why warn me if the end is already chosen? Myra lowered herself to the floor, sitting across from him. The silver strands in her robe caught the faint glow of the blue flame. For a long moment, she was silent, as though she was choosing each word with care. My people were not always like this, she said at last. Long ago, the Villery were known for their courage and honor. We faced storms, beasts, and endless wars, yet we grew strong because we stood together. But now, the court lives in fear. No one speaks against the Queen. No one dares to act. The spirit of our people is fading, replaced by silence and obedience. She lifted her eyes, steady and sharp. When I saw you brought here, I remembered the stories I studied in secret. Stories of humans who crossed oceans of fire, who built homes on frozen worlds, who fought enemies greater than themselves and still rose again. I have wondered if such strength is still real. If it is, I want to see it. Ron listened closely. Her words stirred something deep inside him. He thought of the explorers of old Earth, the ones who left their homes behind to sail into darkness. He thought of human survivors who faced disasters, yet rebuilt each time. He realized Myra was not only risking herself to help him. She was searching for something her own people had lost. You think I can prove something to you, Ron said. I think you can prove something to yourself, Myra answered. If you let them destroy you without a voice, then you are what they believe. But if you endure, if you stand even when the judgment is fixed, then you are what I hope. A spark that cannot be silenced. Her words gave him strength, though doubt still clouded his mind. But what can I do, chained in a cell, surrounded by enemies? Myra leaned closer. Her whisper was steady and filled with purpose. You can endure. You can remember who you are. And when the trial comes, I will be there. Do not lose your courage. I will find a way to act. Ron studied her face. There was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. She was young, perhaps younger than he first thought, but her spirit was firm as steel. For the first time since his capture, he felt not only hope but also a duty. If she was willing to risk her life for him, then he could not give in to despair. Very well, he said quietly. I will endure. I will not let them see me break. A faint smile touched her lips. That is all I ask. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly in the hall outside. Myra rose quickly, gathering the bundle and hiding the remains of the food he had already eaten. She moved to the door, her robe flowing behind her like silver water. Before she left, she looked back once more. Her voice was soft, but her words carried a weight that filled the chamber. Remember this. The Queen is strong, but fear is her weapon. If you do not fear her, then you have already taken her power away. Then she slipped through the door, leaving Ron alone again. The silence that followed was different now. It no longer felt like a heavy prison pressing down on him. It felt like a test, a waiting ground before something greater. He touched the wall beside him, steadying his breath. He thought of Myra's words, of the courage his ancestors carried, and of the fire within every human who refused to give up. He felt that fire stir in him now. He whispered to himself, steady and firm, I will endure. And in that moment, though the walls of the chamber had not changed, the air inside felt lighter. He was no longer only a prisoner. He was a man waiting for the chance to prove what it meant to be human. The chamber grew colder as another night passed. Ron did not know how many days he had been locked inside, but his body told him it was long. His beard had begun to grow rough, and his muscles ached from sitting on the hard floor. Yet his spirit felt steadier than before. Myra's visits gave him more than food or water. They gave him something no prison could take away: hope. When the door opened again, he knew it was her even before he saw her. Her steps were lighter than the guards, and her movements carried no cruelty. Myra entered quickly, carrying another small bundle hidden inside her robe. She placed it beside him, then sat across from him on the floor. "You are stronger than when I first saw you," she said quietly. "Your eyes no longer carry only fear." Ron gave a small smile. "That is because you brought me strength. Without you, I would already be broken." Her expression softened, but her eyes still held caution. "Be careful with your words. If anyone hears, both of us will pay the price." "I know," he said. "But if this chamber is my end, then at least I will speak the truth before it comes. You saved me, Myra. Not only with food and water. You gave me reason to believe I am not already lost." Her lips curved slightly at that, though she lowered her gaze as if hiding the feeling. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. The blue flame on the wall swayed softly, casting shadows that danced across the silver strands of her robe. Ron broke the silence with a question that had weighed on him since her first visit. "Why study humans? You could have hidden in safety, obeying your queen. Instead, you took a risk to learn about us." Myra looked at him with thoughtful eyes. "Because I have always felt there is more to life than obedience. My people whisper of old times when the Veeleri explored the stars with courage, when we stood against enemies with unity. But now, we live under fear. Even the court bends their heads without question. I wanted to know if others beyond our world lived differently. When I read of humans, I found stories of fire and storms, of survival against impossible odds. I wanted to see if those stories were true." Ron nodded slowly. "And what do you see now, sitting here in this chamber with me?" She studied him for a moment before answering. "I see that even in chains, you carry pride. You do not bow, even knowing what awaits you. That is what I hope to find. A strength my people have forgotten." Her words filled him with both pride and sorrow. He wished he could show her more than his broken state in a prison cell. Yet he also understood. Humans did not shine only in victory. They shone in struggle, in standing when all forces pressed them down. "Let me tell you a story," Ron said. "A long time ago, on my world, there were people who lived on small boats. They sailed across oceans wider than they had ever seen, searching for new lands. Many never returned. The sea swallowed them, storms crushed them, hunger defeated them. But some endured, and they found islands and lands no one had touched before. They built homes, raised families, and turned unknown worlds into places of life. That is what it means to be human. We may fall, but we rise again." Myra listened closely, her eyes bright with quiet wonder. "Your people crossed oceans without knowing if land existed on the other side. That is courage beyond fear." "It is not only courage," Ron said. "It is hope. We hope there is something waiting for us. Even if we cannot see it, we believe." She sat in silence for a moment, her mind turning over his words. Then she spoke, her voice softer. If my people remembered hope, perhaps we would not be as we are now. Ron leaned closer, his voice steady. Then you must remember it, Myra. Even if your people have forgotten, you can carry it. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Ron felt a bond forming. It was not built on freedom or power, but on trust and shared truth. In a fortress filled with fear, they had found each other. The sound of distant footsteps broke the silence. Myra's head turned sharply, listening. She rose quickly, gathering the bundle. Before she left, she placed her hand lightly on his arm. The touch was brief, but it carried warmth that no cold chamber could erase. I will return, she whispered. And when the trial is announced, I will stand with you. Do not lose your strength before then. Ron nodded firmly. I will endure. You have my word. She slipped out the door, leaving the chamber in silence once more. That night, Ron lay awake, replaying every word they had shared. He thought of her hand on his arm, of the light in her eyes when he told the story of human explorers. He knew the danger they both faced, yet he also knew something deeper now. It was more than survival. It was a bond, fragile yet strong, growing with every secret meeting. She was the daughter of his enemy, yet she was also the only one who saw him as more than a prisoner. He whispered to himself in the darkness, steady and calm. I will not break. Not for them. Not for her. I will stand. The blue flame flickered as if in answer, its light casting steady shadows across the chamber walls. And though he was alone again, he no longer felt like a man waiting for death. He felt like a man carrying both his own hope and hers, a dangerous bond that might change more than either of them could imagine. The citadel never slept. Even in the deep hours of the night, Ron could hear faint sounds beyond the chamber walls, boots striking stone, voices speaking in the alien tongue, the low hum of strange machines. He counted those sounds like a clock, trying to measure the time. Each day blended into the next, yet he knew something was changing. The air itself felt heavier, as if the walls were waiting for an event soon to come. When Myra visited again, her face was more tense than before. She entered quickly, her robe drawn tightly around her as if to hide her presence. She set down another bundle of food, but this time she did not sit. She stood close to the wall, her voice low and urgent. The court has spoken, she said. The Queen has announced your trial. It will take place in 2 nights. Ron's chest tightened. He had prepared himself for this moment, yet the words still struck him like a blow. So soon? Yes, Myra said, her eyes sharp with worry. They will gather in the great hall. My mother will stand before the council, and you will be brought forward as a prisoner. They will accuse you of spying, of bringing danger to our world, of being a threat to the Villery. And the judgment? Ron asked, though he already knew the answer. The judgment is already written, Myra replied. They will call you guilty. The sentence is death. But remember what I told you. Do not show fear. Do not bow. If you do, then even in their eyes, you will remain a man, not a broken prisoner. Ron looked at her closely. You speak as if you plan to stand with me. Her lips pressed together for a moment before she answered. I will speak when the time comes. My words may not save you, but they will be heard. The court will see that not all believe in the silence of fear. He shook his head. If you speak against them, you will put yourself in danger. I know, Myra said simply. But if I remain silent, then I am no better than those who obey blindly. I cannot live in silence forever. Her courage stirred something deep inside him. He wanted to tell her to be careful, to protect herself, but he also knew that nothing could change her choice. She carried the same fire he had seen in old stories of human heroes, the kind that could not be hidden once it was lit. The next day passed slowly. Guards entered his chamber to chain his arms and lead him through the citadel. They did not speak to him, but their eyes burned with suspicion and hatred. They brought him to a larger cell, closer to the great hall. Through the cracks in the walls, he could hear the sound of many voices, as if the citadel itself was filling with more people. The trial would not be a private judgment. It would be a performance for all to see. That night, Myra came again, though more carefully than before. She slipped through the door when the hall outside was empty, her face pale with worry. She carried no food this time, only words. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "They will bring you before the court tomorrow." Ron nodded. His stomach was tight with both fear and determination. "Then tomorrow I will stand." She studied him in silence, then lowered her voice further. "I must warn you of something else. The Queen does not only want your death. She wants to use you as a lesson. She will speak of humans as liars, as destroyers, as a danger to our world. She will use your fall to tighten her grip on the court. That is why you must not bend. If you stand, even in defeat, then her words will not have full power." Ron drew a deep breath. "And you? What will you do when she speaks?" Myra's eyes shone in the dim light. "I will speak too. I cannot let her words stand alone. If I remain silent, then I betray both you and myself." Ron reached forward, his chained hands heavy, and touched the edge of her robe. It was a small gesture, but it carried all the thanks he could not put into words. "Whatever happens, Myra, I will remember your courage." She looked at him, her face firm, though her eyes softened. "And I will remember yours." When she left, Ron lay awake for a long time. The blue flame on the wall flickered, casting restless shadows across the chamber. He thought of the trial, of the Queen's voice echoing in the great hall, of Myra stepping forward to stand against her own mother. He thought of the chains around his arms and the eyes of the Villery watching for any sign of weakness. Fear pressed on him like a heavy stone. Yet beneath it, a spark burned brighter. He would not let fear decide his end. He would face them with the strength of every human who had ever stood against impossible odds. The morning came with harsh light flooding the hall. Guards entered with sharp voices, unlocking his door. They chained his wrists and pulled him to his feet. The iron bit into his skin, but he kept his head high. As they led him through the citadel, he saw glimpses of the world outside the chamber for the first time. Towering walls of crystal rose above him, glowing faintly with inner light. The halls were filled with banners of silver and blue, marked with the crest of the Villery Queen. Soldiers lined the passageways, their armor polished like mirrors, their eyes cold and sharp. At the end of the hall, the great doors stood waiting. They were carved with shapes of wings and fire, taller than any human building. Beyond those doors, the court waited. Beyond those doors, his trial would begin. Ron lifted his head, his breath steady. He remembered Myra's words. "Do not fear. Do not bow. Endure." As the doors opened with a sound like thunder, he stepped forward into the light of the great hall, ready to face his fate. The great hall was vast beyond anything Ron had imagined. Its ceiling stretched high like the sky, carved with glowing crystals that shone like stars. Tall pillars lined the chamber, each carved with the faces of past rulers. The walls gleamed with silver and blue banners, the symbol of the Queen shining in the center. Rows of Villery nobles filled the hall, their robes shimmering in the light. Their eyes were sharp, fixed on the human prisoner who had been dragged into their presence. A wave of whispers moved through the crowd as they saw Ron. Some voices carried anger, others curiosity, but none carried kindness. The guards pushed Ron forward, forcing him to the center of the hall. Chains clinked around his wrists and ankles, but he kept his head high. He would not bend, not even under so many eyes. At the far end of the hall, raised above all others, sat the queen herself. Her throne was carved from black crystal, tall and cold like the mountains. She wore a crown of silver threads that shimmered with every movement. Her eyes were fierce and unyielding, glowing faintly like fire in the darkness. When she spoke, her voice filled the entire hall. Here stands the human. He was found trespassing in our skies, his ship falling upon our land. He claims to be an explorer, yet we know the truth. Humans are deceivers, destroyers, thieves of worlds. This man is no guest. He is a spy, a danger to our people. The hall shook with voices as the nobles shouted their agreement. Some raised their hands, others pounded the floor with their staffs. The sound was heavy, pressing against Ron's chest like thunder. But he did not lower his head. He looked up at the queen and met her eyes. Her gaze was sharp, but he held steady. He remembered Myra's words. Do not fear. Do not bow. Endure. The queen rose from her throne, her robe flowing like a storm around her. This court will see justice. He will be judged for his crimes. But let it be known, the judgment is already clear. This man represents danger. His kind has no place among the Villery. His fate will show the strength of our rule. Again the nobles cheered. The sound of their voices echoed across the hall. Then, as the queen prepared to speak the final words, another voice cut through the air. Wait. The hall grew silent. Every head turned. Myra stepped forward from the line of nobles, her silver robe shining in the crystal light. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried fire. She walked to the center of the hall, standing only a few steps away from Ron. The queen's eyes narrowed. Daughter. Why do you speak in the court of judgment? Myra bowed her head briefly, then lifted it again. Her voice was clear and strong. Because silence is no longer enough. You call this man a spy, yet you have shown no proof. You call his kind destroyers, yet you speak only of fear, not truth. If our people are truly strong, then we should not fear one human who stands alone. A murmur spread through the hall. Some nobles whispered in shock, others frowned with disapproval. The queen's hand tightened on the arm of her throne. You dare speak against me, the queen said, her voice sharp as a blade. I dare to speak for truth, Myra answered. This man has endured chains, hunger, and fear, yet he does not bow. He stands with courage even as you condemn him without cause. That courage is not weakness. It is strength. A strength my people have forgotten. The hall erupted again, but this time the voices were divided. Some shouted against her, demanding silence. Others remained quiet, their eyes uncertain, their thoughts stirred by her words. Ron stood in silence, his heart pounding. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. Myra, the queen's daughter, was risking everything for him. The queen rose to her full height, her eyes blazing with fury. You shame this court with your words. You dare defend an enemy before your own people. Myra did not flinch. I do not defend an enemy. I defend a voice that deserves to be heard. If you silence him without proof, then you show fear, not strength. And if you show fear, then you are no longer the queen our people need." The hall gasped. The words struck like lightning. Never before had anyone spoken against the queen so openly, not even her own blood. For a moment, silence filled the hall. The queen's face was hard as stone. Her voice, when it came, was low and filled with wrath. "Enough. Guards, seize them both." The soldiers moved quickly, their armor clashing as they rushed forward. Ron felt hands grip his arms, pulling him down. He struggled against the chains, his muscles straining, but the weight was too much. Myra turned toward him, her eyes fierce. "Do not give up," she whispered, her voice lost beneath the chaos of the hall. The queen raised her hand high. "Take them away. Let this hall see what happens to those who stand against the throne." The nobles shouted again, their voices filling the great hall with thunder. Some cheered, others remained silent, but none dared step forward to help. Ron was dragged toward the side of the hall, the chains cutting into his wrists. Yet even as he stumbled, he kept his head high. Myra walked beside him, her robe flowing behind her, her steps steady and proud. For the first time since his capture, Ron felt that he was not alone. They were bound, they were condemned, but together they carried something greater than fear. A spark had been lit in the heart of the court, and even the queen's wrath could not fully extinguish it. As the guards forced them toward the dark passages beneath the citadel, Ron's thoughts burned with one truth. The trial was not the end. It was only the beginning. The dungeons beneath the citadel were carved deep into the rock. The air was cold, heavy with dampness, and the walls glowed faintly from patches of strange moss. The guards had locked Ron and Myra inside a single cell, iron bars separating them from the long hallway that stretched into darkness. Chains hung from the stone, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the silence. Ron sat against the wall, his wrists raw from the metal cuffs. He could feel the weight of his failure pressing against his chest. The queen had declared them enemies, and tomorrow the court would demand their end. But when he looked at Myra, he saw no fear in her eyes. She sat across from him, her silver robe torn from the struggle, her hands resting calmly on her knees. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, steady as the stars above. "You should not have spoken for me," Ron said quietly. His voice was rough from the shouting in the great hall. "Now you are trapped here because of me." Myra shook her head. "I spoke because silence would have been a greater prison. You do not understand, Ron. My people have grown proud, blind to the truth. Your presence has shaken them. That is why my mother fears you. She fears what you represent." Ron frowned. "I am only one man. I came here by accident. My ship fell from the skies. I have no army, no power." "You have something more dangerous," Myra said. "You have courage. That alone can break chains." Before Ron could answer, heavy footsteps echoed in the hall. Two guards approached, their spears glowing with blue energy. They stopped outside the cell, their faces hidden behind silver helmets. "The queen has ordered silence," one guard said. "Speak no more. Tomorrow, your voices will be gone forever." The other guard struck the bars with his spear, sending sparks across the stone. Then they turned and marched back into the shadows. Ron's hands clenched. He had faced battles before, but never had he felt so powerless. Chains, bars, and endless stone stood between him and freedom. Yet Myra sat calm, her eyes watching him with quiet strength. "Do you trust me, Ron?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then nodded. Yes. I do. Then listen carefully, she whispered. These dungeons were built long ago. Few remember their secrets, but I learned them when I was a child. Behind these stones runs a passage. It was meant as an escape for rulers in times of danger. My mother believes it forgotten. But I know it still exists. Ron's eyes widened. An escape passage. Yes, Myra said. But we must act before dawn, when the guards change their watch. That is when the halls above will be weakest. Until then, we wait. The hours crawled by slowly. The dungeon remained silent except for the dripping water and the faint hum of energy from the guards' weapons. Ron tried to rest, but his mind was restless. Every sound felt louder in the stillness, every shadow heavier. At last, the faint echo of a horn sounded above. The change of watch had begun. Myra rose to her feet, her hands brushing against the stones of the wall. She pressed her palm against a certain mark, and to Ron's shock, one of the stones shifted slightly. The wall opened with a soft grind of stone against stone, revealing a narrow passage lit by glowing moss. Cold air drifted through, carrying the scent of earth and freedom. Hurry, Myra said. We have little time. Ron followed her through the passage. The chains around his wrists rattled, but he kept moving, forcing himself through the narrow space. The air was tight, and the stone scraped his shoulders, but each step forward filled him with new strength. The passage wound upward, curving through the rock. At times, they had to crawl, pushing through tight turns. At others, they climbed old stone steps covered in dust. The sound of the guards faded behind them, replaced by the distant rush of wind. At last, they reached a small iron gate. Myra pressed her hand against the lock, and faint light glowed from her skin. With a soft click, the gate opened. Beyond it lay the outer cliffs of the citadel, high above the valley below. The night sky stretched wide, filled with stars, and the cold wind whipped around them. Ron stepped out first, breathing in the fresh air. For the first time since his capture, he felt the weight of the chains lessen. Freedom was close, yet danger still surrounded them. We must move quickly, Myra said. The patrols will pass here soon. If they find us, we will not escape again. Together they moved along the cliffside, keeping low against the rocks. The path was narrow, the drop below endless, but Myra walked with steady steps, guiding him with sure hands. Ron followed, his eyes sharp for any sign of movement. Halfway across the path, a sudden light flared above. A patrol ship glided past, its engines humming like thunder. Blue searchlights swept across the cliffs, moving dangerously close to where they stood. Ron pulled Myra against the stone, pressing them both into the shadows. The light swept over them once, twice, before sliding away into the distance. Only when the hum of the engines faded did they breathe again. That was close, Ron whispered. Myra nodded. It will only get harder from here. They moved again, climbing down a narrow path that led toward the valley. The rocks were sharp, cutting into their hands, but they kept going. Each step carried them farther from the Queen's wrath and closer to the unknown freedom beyond. Finally, after what felt like endless hours, they reached the base of the cliffs. Before them stretched the dark forest, its trees tall and thick, their leaves glowing faintly in the starlight. Strange sounds echoed from within, low growls and distant calls, but the forest promised shelter. Ron looked at Myra. Where do we go now? She gazed into the forest, her eyes thoughtful. There is an old outpost, abandoned long ago. If we can reach it, we may find tools, food, perhaps even a way to signal your people. But the forest is dangerous. Creatures hunt here at night. Ron clenched his fists. Then we face them together. Myra gave a small smile, her eyes soft in the starlight. Together, then. With that, they stepped into the forest. The trees closed around them, and the citadel vanished from sight. Behind them, alarms began to echo faintly in the distance. The Queen had discovered their escape. The hunt had begun. But Ron no longer felt powerless. He was no longer a prisoner in chains. He was a man with purpose, and by his side walked the daughter of a queen who dared defy her own blood. For the first time since he had fallen to this world, hope burned bright in his heart. The forest was alive with whispers. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a branch, carried the promise of danger. Strange creatures moved through the shadows, their glowing eyes peering from the darkness. Ron felt the weight of his chains, now loosened but still present, reminding him of what he had endured. Yet the cold fear that had haunted him in the citadel was gone. Next to him, Myra moved with sure steps, her robe brushing lightly against the glowing moss. "Stay close," she whispered. "The forest tests those who enter. It hides both predators and secrets." Ron nodded, gripping the strap of a makeshift harness she had given him. Together they moved deeper into the forest, guided by the faint light of the stars and Myra's quiet intuition. Each step required care. Vines coiled around their feet, roots reached like hands from the ground, and every shadow seemed to hold movement. They paused at the edge of a small clearing. The moonlight spilled over a pool of water, its surface smooth and reflective. Ron bent down and drank, the cold liquid restoring strength to his tired body. Myra crouched beside him, her eyes scanning the trees. "There," she said finally, pointing toward a faint glow between the trunks. "The old outpost. If we can reach it, we can rest, gather supplies, and plan the next step." The journey to the outpost was treacherous. The forest seemed to resist them at every turn. A low growl echoed from behind a thick cluster of trees, and shadows shifted as if something large had moved unseen. Ron tightened his grip on Myra's hand. "What was that?" he asked quietly. "Predators," she said. "But not all are hunters. Some only watch. Keep calm, and they will not harm us." They moved carefully, stepping over roots and ducking under low-hanging branches. Occasionally, a creature would peer at them from the darkness, then disappear as quickly as it appeared. Ron's heart pounded with both fear and exhilaration. He was alive, moving freely, yet danger was constant. After what felt like hours, they reached the outpost. It was small, built from stone and metal, overgrown with vines and moss. The doors creaked as Myra pushed them open. Inside, the air was cool and dry, a welcome change from the damp forest. Dust covered the surfaces, but there were signs of previous inhabitants' tools, crates, and a small communication device that flickered faintly with power. Ron set down his pack and looked around, amazed at their luck. "We actually made it," he whispered. Myra smiled, her eyes reflecting both relief and determination. "We are not safe yet. The Queen will not let this go unnoticed. But here, we can rest and think of our next move." They worked quickly to make the outpost habitable. Ron tended to minor wounds on his hands and arms from the escape, while Myra cleaned and organized the supplies. The night stretched around them, filled with the sounds of the forest, but for the first time, they felt a sense of control. When the tasks were done, Myra sat beside him. "Ron, you must understand, she said softly, we are free for now, but freedom comes with choice. The Queen will hunt us. We must decide where to go, how to survive, and whether to return to the world above or find a new path. Ron nodded, feeling the truth in her words. I do not know what lies ahead, but I will face it. With you. Her eyes softened, and for a moment the weight of her royal blood seemed less important than the person she was. Then we face it together, she said. The following days were a test of both endurance and courage. The forest was not forgiving. Predators watched from the shadows, and strange storms rolled in from the mountains, bringing wind and rain that chilled them to the bone. Yet each challenge strengthened their bond. Ron learned to move quietly, to listen to the sounds of the forest, and to trust Myra's instincts. Myra, in turn, learned to rely on his strength and calm reasoning. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ron stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the valley. The citadel was far in the distance, a shadow against the fading light. Myra joined him, her robe fluttering in the wind. Do you see it? She asked. All we have left behind, and yet all we carry with us the choice to live, to decide our own path. Ron nodded. I see it. And I see hope. Even in the heart of an empire that sought to destroy us, we have found freedom. Together. Myra reached out and took his hand. You have changed me, Ron. You have reminded me that courage does not come from power, but from standing for what is right. You have reminded me of what my people have forgotten. He squeezed her hand. And you have reminded me that even in a world of strangers, trust and hope can be found. That is strength too. The night air grew colder, and the first stars appeared, bright against the velvet sky. Myra looked upward, then back at Ron. We must move again at dawn. The Queen's forces will not stop searching. But wherever we go, we will go as free people, not as prisoners. Ron felt a surge of determination. Then let us leave behind fear and step forward into freedom. When dawn arrived, they prepared the small craft hidden near the outpost. It had been old, powered by energy cells that flickered but still worked. Myra had repaired it as best she could. Together, they boarded, the forest slowly shrinking behind them as the engines roared to life. As the craft lifted into the sky, Ron looked at Myra. Where will we go? She smiled, her eyes reflecting the first light of the sun. Anywhere we choose. No one will tell us what to do, no one will chain our spirits. The stars are ours. The citadel grew smaller beneath them, the Queen's power unable to reach them. They soared past mountains and rivers, past forests and plains, leaving behind the world that had tried to cage them. Ron and Myra stood together, hands clasped, looking forward to the unknown. The universe stretched before them, vast and full of possibilities. For the first time, they were free, and that freedom carried a strength that neither chains nor fear could ever take away. The craft shot upward into the stars, carrying two souls who had defied an empire, defied fear, and chosen their own destiny. Together, they would chart a path not only through the galaxy, but through the heart of courage and hope itself. Ron whispered softly, "We are free." Myra nodded, her gaze fixed on the endless sky. "And we will remain free." The stars welcomed them, endless and bright, as their journey into freedom truly began.